We tend to think of history as a story of kings, of empires, of great inventions. But beneath that familiar narrative, there lies a different force, a much more powerful, unseen one. A silent architect that has sculpted civilizations, directed the course of empires, and written its legacy into our very biology. This is the profound and terrifying history of human disease. Before any recorded memory, before the first word was ever written down, humanity was locked in a constant silent struggle. The greatest predators out there weren't the lions or the mammoths. They were microscopic invaders that turned the human body itself into a battleground. For the earliest humans living in these small nomadic groups, the threat of a mass epidemic was actually pretty limited. But this didn't mean life was healthy, far from it. It was a relentless grind against parasites, against infections from the smallest of injuries, and against illnesses born from hunger. Sickness wasn't an event. It was a constant companion, an intimate feature of a short and often brutal existence. The truest history of this struggle isn't found in texts, but in bone. Ancient skeletal remains, they're like stone archives. They reveal these healed lesions, these deformities, these chronic infections, a silent physical record of survival and suffering that's as old as humanity itself. And then, everything changed. The moment humanity stopped wandering and began to build was one of the most important turning points in our history. But this incredible leap forward, the very birth of civilization, it came with a hidden and a truly terrible biological price. And this is where we find a deep, profound paradox. The very innovations that allowed humanity to flourish, things like agriculture, permanent settlements, community, well, they also created the perfect crucible for pathogens. In solving one problem of survival, we unleashed a new and far deadlier threat. It was really a formula for sickness. You have hundreds of people all gathered in one place. They're living in close quarters, right next to their domesticated animals, surrounded by their own waste and standing water. This created a concentrated little ecosystem where microbes could suddenly leap from animal to human and then spread from person to person with terrifying ease. And one of the very first mass killers to walk right through that open door was tuberculosis. Now, this wasn't some swift plague. It was a slow, consuming disease. It wasted the body away over months, even years, and it thrived in the very houses we built for our own protection, becoming a disease of civilization itself. And we know this because the evidence is just ancient. Skeletons that have been unearthed from Neolithic settlements, they bear the unmistakable marks of tuberculosis, dating back 9,000 years. This disease has been intertwined with settled human life almost from the very beginning. It's a shadow born of our own success. But some diseases attacked more than just the body. Leprosy, for instance, inflicted what was often called a second death. Beyond the horrific physical toll of the disease, the fear it inspired led to a complete and total social annihilation. To be diagnosed with leprosy was to be exiled, to be ritually erased from your own community while you were still alive. Now, as these first settlements grew into the first great cities and empires, humanity's relationship with disease entered a new, much more explosive phase. The sheer scale of population, of trade, of conflict was about to amplify death beyond all previous measure. The great cities of the ancient world, places like Rome or the cities of Mesopotamia, they were magnificent, yes, but they were also biological time bombs. They were cauldrons of filth, density, and connectivity. Every single trade route that brought silks and spices could also be a highway for a virus. Every grain silo that fed the city also fed the rats and the fleas they carried. And out of this cauldron came monsters, like smallpox. We find its signature pockmarks on Egyptian mummies. This was a brutal, indiscriminate killer. It didn't care if you were a pharaoh or a farmer. It reshaped entire bloodlines and left those who survived forever marked by its passage. Conquest was never just a matter of swords and spears. It was also a form of biological warfare, whether it was intentional or not. An army on the march was the most effective delivery system for disease the world had ever seen, carrying pathogens to whole new populations with absolutely no immunity and no defense. But all of this, as terrible as it was really just a prelude. Because in the 14th century, a single disease event would occur that was so catastrophic, it would fundamentally remake an entire continent. We are, of course, talking about the Black Death.
Its velocity was just breathtaking. Following the arteries of trade, the plague swept across the known world in just a handful of years. It moved with a speed and a lethality that must have felt like the end of the world. And for millions, it was.
The scale of the devastation is difficult, almost impossible to truly comprehend. In many parts of Europe, as many as 1 out of every 2 people vanished in just a few short years. It's a number so vast it threatens to become an abstraction, but the reality on the ground was a genuine apocalypse.
This wasn't just a death toll. It was the complete unraveling of society. The world was literally emptying out. The human landscape was being erased. And the fundamental structures of life, family, government, religion, they just crumbled under the strain. The aftermath of it all was transformative. The plague didn't just alter demographics, it altered minds. It shattered faith in old institutions, it sparked new religious fervor, and it completely upended social and economic orders. When the dust finally settled, Europe was a different place, inhabited by people with profoundly different ideas about the world.
After the plague, the world began to connect in ways it never had before. But this new age of exploration and industry, well, it just created new pathways for death, linking continents together in a shared and often tragic biological destiny. And nowhere was this more catastrophic than in the Americas. When European ships arrived, they brought invisible passengers, smallpox, measles, influenza. For the indigenous populations who had no prior exposure, the result was what we now call the Great Dying, a demographic collapse so complete it stands as one of the worst in all of human history. As much as 90% of the indigenous population was lost.
The industrial age, of course, brought its own signature killers. Cholera, born from the polluted water of sprawling cities. Typhus, the so-called camp fever that stalked armies and prisons. And malaria, an ancient scourge that shaped settlement and conquest in tropical regions all across the globe. History tends to remember the great battles and the brilliant generals, but so often the silent victor was typhus. It could cripple an army before it ever even reached the battlefield, deciding the fate of entire nations without a single shot ever being fired. After a millennia of devastation, this long, dark history leaves its mark. The enduring legacy of this struggle isn't just written in stone or in text, it's written in our very biology. Because the struggle has never ended. From the Black Death to the influenza of 1918 to the emergence of HIV and more recent outbreaks, the ancient dynamic between humanity and pathogen is ongoing. The dance continues. So it forces us to ask an ultimate question. When we look back, who was truly in charge? What forces really shaped the rise and fall of civilizations? Perhaps the answer lies beyond the usual suspects, with the silent, microscopic architects of our history. Disease has been a primary driver of human evolution. It hasn't been just a series of unfortunate events, but a constant, shaping pressure that has sculpted our DNA, our societies, and even our rituals over millennia. This history isn't just found in books. It's carried within the human body. Our immune system is like a living library. It's an archive of all the battles that were fought and survived by generations past. It is the biological memory of plagues and pandemics stretching all the way back to the dawn of our time. The human story is, without a doubt, one of innovation and genius. But it is just as much a story of resilience, of adaptation, and of a profound, humbling endurance against the oldest and most intimate of all our enemies.